My name is Sylvia, and I am 34 years old. I work as an interior designer here in Denver, Colorado. For 6 years, I believed my marriage was the best thing that ever happened to me. Until that Sunday morning at Maple Grove Restaurant, when a cup of hot coffee came crashing down on my face. The burning sensation on my skin was painful, but what hurt more was the cold, emotionless look in my husband's eyes. He had no idea who was standing right behind me. Before I begin this story, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have not already. If you have ever trusted the wrong person, this story is for you. Stay until the very end to see what happened when I finally decided to stop being silent. 4 years before our wedding, I met Derek at a design exhibition in downtown Denver. I was 28 years old at the time, filled with ambition and dreams. I had just left my comfortable position at a large design firm to start my own studio. It was a risk. I had taken out a loan from the bank, and every penny I had was invested in making my small business work. The exhibition was my first major showcase as an independent designer. I had spent weeks preparing my collection, arranging every piece of furniture, every fabric sample, every lighting fixture to perfection. I was nervous but excited, standing beside my display, hoping someone would notice my work. That is when Derek walked in. He was wearing a gray suit that fit him perfectly, and he had this confident smile that immediately caught my attention. He introduced himself as a sales manager at a BMW dealership and said he was looking for someone to redesign their showroom. We started talking, and before I knew it, 2 hours had passed. He asked me about my vision for the studio, about my dreams for the future. No one had ever shown such genuine interest in my work before. When he suggested we continue our conversation over dinner, I said yes, without hesitation. At the restaurant that evening, Derek was charming and attentive. He listened to every word I said, asked thoughtful questions, and made me feel like the most important person in the room. When the check came, he paid in cash. I remember him making a joke about credit cards being a trap. At the time, I thought it was a smart financial philosophy. I did not see it as a warning sign. The months that followed were filled with what I thought was genuine love. Derek and I dated for 18 months before he proposed. During that time, he showed me a side of himself that seemed perfect. He took me hiking in Rocky Mountain National Park, where we would spend entire days exploring trails and watching sunsets. Every Friday night, he would cook dinner for me at his apartment. Nothing fancy, just simple meals made with care. Whenever I completed a major project at my studio, flowers would arrive at my door. A dozen roses or sometimes sunflowers, because he knew they were my favorite. He remembered every little detail about me, every preference, every story I had ever told him. I introduced him to my mother, Helen, about 6 months into our relationship. My father had passed away when I was 19, and my mother had been my rock ever since. She was protective of me, always worried that I worked too hard and did not take enough time for myself. When she met Derek, she was immediately charmed. After dinner that night, she pulled me aside and said she was happy I had finally found someone good. She said Derek seemed like a man who would take care of me. I believed her. I believed him. I shared things with Derek that I had never shared with anyone else. I told him about losing my father, about how I had worked multiple jobs throughout college to support myself. I explained that I had never been in a serious relationship before because I was always focused on my career. He was the first man who made me want something more than just professional success. He was the first man who made me want a family. Looking back now, I realize there were signs I should have noticed. Derek never talked about his own finances. Whenever I asked about his savings or his plans for the future, he would skillfully change the subject. I told myself he was just a private person. I told myself it did not matter because we loved each other. The proposal came on a Thursday evening at the same restaurant where we had our first dinner. Derek had arranged for the table by the window, the one with the view of the city lights. When he got down on one knee and opened that small velvet box, I felt like I was living in a dream. The ring was beautiful. I did not know how much it cost, and I did not ask. Derek said he wanted to take care of me to give me everything I deserved. I said yes, with tears streaming down my face. Our wedding was intimate, just 80 guests at a vineyard outside Denver. The ceremony was held under a wooden arch covered in white roses, with the mountains visible in the distance. It was everything I had ever imagined. What I did not imagine was paying for most of it myself. A few weeks before the wedding, Derek mentioned that his money was tied up in investments. He said it would be free soon, but the timing was not right. I did not mind. I had the savings, and I thought that was what marriage was about. Sharing, supporting each other. My mother asked me once if I was sure about Derek's financial situation. I dismissed her concern. I told her he had a good job and just did not like to show off. She nodded, but I could see the worry in her eyes. I chose to ignore it. The first year of our marriage was wonderful, at least on the surface. We rented a 2-bedroom apartment in Cherry Creek, a nice neighborhood with tree-lined streets and good restaurants. My studio was growing. I hired 2 employees and took on bigger projects. Derek seemed proud of my success. He would tell his friends about my work, show them pictures of my designs. We had romantic dinners, weekend getaways, long conversations about our future. I wanted children eventually, maybe 2. I wanted to buy a house of our own. Derek agreed with everything, painted the same picture of our life together. But something shifted during that first year. Derek started asking about my income more frequently. How much did I make last month? How much did that client pay? At first, I thought he was just interested in the business. Then he suggested we open a joint account to manage our household finances together. It seemed reasonable. We were married after all. So I agreed. I also added his name as an authorized user on one of my credit cards. It was a small decision that would have enormous consequences. Looking back at that time, I often wonder when exactly things began to change. Was it the moment I handed over that card, or had the change already started slowly, invisibly, long before I could see it? But the truth is, I did not see anything at all. It would take 3 more years and countless wounds before I finally understood who I had really married. The second year of our marriage brought changes I did not expect. Derek's behavior shifted in ways that were subtle, at first easy to dismiss, but impossible to ignore over time. It started with the credit card statements. Derek began checking them every single day. He would scroll through the transactions on his phone, asking questions about each purchase. Why did I buy coffee at that cafe when we had a perfectly good machine at home? Did I really need another blouse for work? I tried to explain that dressing professionally was part of my job. Clients expected a certain appearance from an interior designer. Derek would listen quietly, then fall silent in a way that made me feel guilty. He never yelled, "Not then." He just made me feel like I was doing something wrong. One evening I mentioned that I wanted to buy a new sofa for my office. It was nothing extravagant, just $500 for a simple piece that would make the space more comfortable for clients. Derek reacted as if I had suggested we buy a yacht. He argued that we needed to save money, that we could not afford unnecessary expenses. The argument lasted 2 days. 2 days of cold silences, of Derek sleeping on the couch of tension, filling every corner of our apartment. Eventually I gave in. I did not buy the sofa. 1 week later, Derek came home wearing a new watch. He said it was a gift to himself for closing a big deal at work. I did not say anything, but something inside me tightened. I could not buy a $500 sofa for my business, but he could buy himself a watch. I pushed the thought away. I told myself I was being petty. The money in our joint account started disappearing. The first time I noticed about $3,000 was missing from what I expected the balance to be. I asked Derek about it, and he said it was for car repairs and some work-related expenses. I accepted his explanation without question. The next month, another $4,000 was gone. This time, Derek said he had lent money to a colleague who was going through a difficult time. When I asked who, he became defensive. His voice sharpened. He asked if I did not trust him. The argument ended with me apologizing. I apologized for asking questions about my own money. From that point on, I started walking on eggshells in my own home. I second-guessed every purchase, no matter how small. I felt guilty using the credit card even for groceries. I stopped telling Derek about my business income because I was afraid of the questions that would follow. Derek also began to change our social life. Whenever I made plans to see friends, he would complain. He would ask why I preferred spending time with them instead of with my own husband. He would sulk for hours if I went out, making me feel terrible for leaving him alone. Gradually, I started declining invitations. I made excuses. I told my friends I was too busy with work. One by one, they stopped calling. My relationship with my mother also suffered. Derek made comments about Helen being too involved in our lives. He said she was always giving opinions where they were not wanted. I found myself calling her less often, visiting less frequently. When she asked if something was wrong, I lied. I told her everything was fine. There was one person who did not give up so easily. Miranda. My best friend from college called me one evening out of the blue. We had not spoken in months, and she said she was worried about me. She said I sounded different, distant. I denied everything. I told her work was just overwhelming, that I would reach out soon. Miranda did not believe me. I could hear it in her voice, but she did not push. She just said she was there whenever I needed her. The event that marked a small turning point came on an ordinary Tuesday. I had just signed the biggest contract of my career, a $75,000 project, to design a high-end restaurant downtown. I was thrilled. This was the kind of opportunity I had dreamed about since opening my studio. I rushed home to share the news with Derek. I expected him to be happy to celebrate with me, to tell me how proud he was. Instead, his face remained flat. His first words were not congratulations. His first words were a question. Does this mean you are going to be even busier now? The disappointment I felt in that moment was crushing. Here was the biggest achievement of my professional life, and my husband could not even pretend to be happy for me. For the first time, I truly saw that something was deeply wrong, but I still was not ready to face it. That night, I lay in bed listening to Derek breathe beside me, and I made excuses. Maybe he was stressed. Maybe things at work were difficult. Maybe everything would get better. I had no idea that this was just the beginning. What was coming next would be far, far worse. The third year of my marriage was when Derek's need for control became impossible to deny. It was also when I began to understand the true depth of his deception. It started with a demand. Derek sat me down one evening and said he thought it would be better if he managed all of our finances. He wanted me to hand over my credit cards, all of them, including the one I used for business. He said he was better with money, that he would take care of everything, so I could focus on my work. For the first time in our marriage, I said no. The word came out before I could stop it. I explained that my business card was for professional expenses, that clients and vendors were connected to it, that I could not just hand it over. Derek's expression changed in an instant. The charming man I had married vanished, replaced by someone I did not recognize. He slammed his hand on the table so hard that the glasses rattled. Then he stopped speaking to me entirely. For 3 days he acted as if I did not exist. No words, no eye contact, nothing. Eventually I compromised. I gave him my personal credit card but kept the business one. Derek accepted this, but from that day forward he monitored every transaction on my business account. He would ask about each expense, demanding explanations for charges that were completely ordinary. He also started checking my phone and emails. He said married couples should not have secrets from each other. I changed my email password once just for my business account to protect client information. When Derek discovered this, he was furious. He accused me of hiding things, of being dishonest. That argument ended with him grabbing my phone and deleting several contacts. Miranda's number was one of them. So were the numbers of two other close friends. The financial situation grew worse. I discovered that the joint account we shared was nearly empty. When I asked where the money had gone, Derek claimed he had invested it in a side business. He refused to say what kind of business or where the money actually was. I was scared, but I did not confront him directly. Instead, I started protecting myself in small ways. I opened a secret savings account at a different bank and began depositing small amounts from my business income. It was not much, but it was something. Then came the discovery that changed everything. One evening, Derek was in the shower when his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Without thinking, I glanced at the screen. There was a message from an unknown number. "Tonight, VIP table is ready." Something made me pick up the phone. I scrolled through the conversation and found dozens of similar messages stretching back months. The address mentioned in several of them led to what looked like an underground gambling establishment. My hands were trembling as I checked our credit card statements. What I found made my stomach turn. Cash advances. Dozens of them. Thousands of dollars at a time. The total over the past 2 years was more than $50,000. That was my money, my savings, my years of hard work. All of it had been feeding Derek's gambling addiction without my knowledge. I could not breathe. I wanted to scream to confront him the moment he walked out of that bathroom. But something stopped me. Some survival instinct told me that a confrontation would be dangerous, so I stayed silent. I pretended I had seen nothing. And I began to plan. The 4th and 5th years of my marriage were a strange kind of performance. On the outside, life continued as normal. I went to work, came home, cooked dinner, slept beside a man who was slowly destroying me. Derek's gambling continued and his debts grew. I discovered later that he had started borrowing from dangerous people, loan sharks, who did not care about excuses or payment plans. The pressure on him was mounting, though I did not fully understand it at the time. My mother visited unexpectedly one afternoon. When she saw me, her face fell. I had lost weight, probably about 10 pounds in 6 months. There were dark circles under my eyes that no amount of makeup could hide. She asked what was wrong, and I said nothing, just work stress. Helen did not believe me. She held my hand and told me she was there whenever I needed her. For a moment, I almost told her everything. But then Derek's car pulled into the driveway, and the moment passed. My health was deteriorating. I could not sleep more than a few hours at a time. I was constantly anxious, always waiting for the next argument, the next accusation, the next demand for money. Derek became more desperate. The people he owed money to were threatening him, though I only learned this later. He needed cash urgently, and there was only one source left. My business credit card. The one thing I had protected through everything. That Sunday morning, he suggested we go to Maple Grove for breakfast. It was the restaurant where we had celebrated our first wedding anniversary. I was surprised by the invitation. Derek rarely wanted to go out anymore. But I agreed, hoping it was a sign that things might improve. I had no idea what was really waiting for me at that restaurant. That Sunday morning started like any other. The December air was cold, and I could see my breath forming little clouds as Derek and I walked from the parking lot to Maple Grove Restaurant. Christmas decorations hung in the windows, and soft music drifted out every time someone opened the door. I wore my favorite navy blue sweater dress. I had bought it 3 years earlier, before money became such a complicated subject. Derek was dressed nicely, too, in a button-down shirt and slacks. He even held the door open for me, something he had not done in months. Maple Grove was busy that morning. Families were having brunch. Couples were sharing coffee. An elderly woman sat alone by the window reading a book. The hostess led us to a table near the center of the room, and Derek pulled out my chair for me. For a brief moment, I let myself believe things were changing. Maybe the man I had fallen in love with was still in there somewhere. Maybe this breakfast was his way of trying to make things right. We ordered. I chose the Eggs Benedict that I always used to get, and Derek ordered black coffee and toast. We made small talk while we waited, discussing nothing important. The weather, a movie that was coming out soon, mundane things that felt almost normal. After we finished eating, Derek's expression changed. The pleasant mask he had been wearing slipped away, replaced by something harder, more calculating. He said he needed to talk to me about something important. He said he had an investment opportunity, something that could change our financial situation completely. All he needed was $25,000 to get started. I felt my chest tighten. I knew where this was going. He asked me to give him my business credit card. I stared at him across the table, at this man I had shared a bed with for 6 years. For a moment, I could not speak. Then I shook my head. "No," I said, "that card is for my work. I cannot use it for personal expenses." Derek's jaw tightened. The sweetness in his voice disappeared. He reminded me of everything he claimed to have sacrificed for me, for our marriage, for my career. He said I was being selfish, that I only ever thought about myself. I stayed calm, though my heart was racing. I told him I knew what he had been doing with our money. I told him I knew about the gambling. The words hung in the air between us. Derek's face went pale. For a few seconds neither of us moved, then something shifted in his eyes, something dark and dangerous. He picked up his coffee cup. It was still hot steam rising from the dark liquid inside. Before I could react, before I could even understand what was happening, he threw it in my face. The pain was immediate and intense. Hot coffee splashed across my cheek, my neck, my chest. I screamed, my hands flying up to my face instinctively. The liquid burned through the fabric of my dress, searing my skin. The entire restaurant went silent. I could feel every pair of eyes turning toward us, but I could not see anything through the tears streaming from my eyes. Derek stood up. His voice was cold, completely devoid of emotion. He said that was what I deserved. I sat there, trembling, my face on fire, humiliation and pain, battling for dominance. The man I had married, the man I had trusted with my life, had just assaulted me in a room full of strangers. And then I heard footsteps approaching. A voice, calm but filled with authority, cut through the silence. "You just committed assault in front of more than 20 witnesses." I looked up, blinking through my tears, and saw a woman standing beside our table. She was perhaps in her early 60s, with silver hair pulled back elegantly and sharp, intelligent eyes that were fixed on Derek with an intensity that made him take a step backward. She continued speaking, her voice steady and measured. "My name is Patricia Holloway. I am a retired federal prosecutor. I saw everything. And I have been recording." She held up her phone, the screen facing Derek. On it was a video still recording, capturing his pale, shocked face. Derek tried to speak, to say this was a family matter, but Patricia cut him off. "No," she said, "this is a crime, and this young woman is not alone anymore." I stared at this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere, this woman who was standing between me and my husband like a shield. I did not know who she was or why she had stepped in. All I knew was that for the first time in 6 years, someone was on my side. Patricia looked at me then, and her expression softened. She asked if I was okay, if I needed help. I could barely nod, but somehow I managed. She reached into her purse and pulled out a clean cloth napkin. She pressed it gently against my burning skin and told me to hold it there. Then she turned back to Derek and told him not to move. It was not a request. It was a command. And somehow Derek obeyed. In that moment, sitting in that restaurant with coffee dripping from my face and a stranger standing guard over me, I made a decision. I was done being a victim. I was done being afraid. Whatever came next, I was going to take control of my own life. No more silence. No more submission. No more Derek. Patricia did not waste any time. While keeping one eye on Derek, she pulled out her phone and called the police. Her voice was crisp and professional as she reported an assault at Maple Grove Restaurant. She gave the address, described the situation, and mentioned that she had video evidence. Derek stood frozen, his earlier bravado completely gone. He tried once to say something to explain, but Patricia silenced him with a single look. It was remarkable watching this stranger take complete control of a situation that had spiraled so far out of my hands. The police arrived within 10 minutes. 2 officers walked through the front door, and Patricia immediately approached them. She introduced herself, showed them the video on her phone, and pointed to where I was still sitting, the cloth napkin pressed against my face. The officers listened carefully as Patricia explained what she had witnessed. Several other diners came forward to confirm her account. The woman at the table behind us, a man who had been waiting for his family by the entrance. Even our waiter spoke up, his voice shaking as he described what he had seen. Derek tried to tell his version of events. He said it was an accident that the cup had slipped, but the video showed the truth. It showed him picking up the cup deliberately, aiming it at my face, and throwing it with force. They handcuffed him right there in the middle of the restaurant. As the officers led him toward the door, Derek turned and looked at me. His face was twisted with anger. "You will regret this," he shouted. "You will have nothing without me." I did not respond. I just watched as they took him away, feeling something shift inside me. Fear was still there, but underneath it was something stronger. Relief. Freedom. Patricia stayed with me while we waited for the ambulance she had also called. She held my hand, this woman I had never met before, and told me I was going to be okay. At the hospital, a doctor examined my burns. Second-degree burns on my cheek and neck, he said. Painful, but they would heal with proper care. He took photographs for the medical record, documented everything carefully. Patricia stood in the corner of the room the entire time, refusing to leave. When we were alone, I finally asked her why she had helped me. She was a stranger. She had no obligation to get involved. Patricia smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. She told me she had been a federal prosecutor for 30 years. She had spent her career fighting for people who could not fight for themselves. After retiring, she started volunteering as a legal advisor for domestic violence survivors. She had come to Maple Grove that morning just to have breakfast and read a book. But when she saw Derek and me sit down, something made her pay attention. She noticed my body language, the tension in my shoulders, the way I seemed to brace myself every time Derek spoke. She started recording before the coffee was thrown. Some instinct, she said, had told her something bad was coming. Patricia gave me her card and told me she knew an excellent divorce attorney who specialized in cases involving financial abuse and domestic violence. She said I did not have to go through this alone. That night was the first night I did not sleep under the same roof as Derek. Patricia helped me contact a support center for domestic violence survivors. They had a room available, small but clean and safe. For the first time in years, I slept without worrying about what mood my husband would be in when he woke up. The next morning I called my mother. I told her everything. 6 years of secrets came pouring out of me in a flood of tears and words. Helen cried too. She said she had known something was wrong, had felt it in her bones, but had not known how to reach me. She wanted to come immediately, but I told her I needed a day to get my thoughts together. I promised to see her soon. That afternoon, Patricia took me to meet the attorney she had mentioned. Her name was Grace Whitman, a woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and kind but determined eyes. She had been practicing family law for almost 30 years. Grace listened to my story without interruption. When I finished, she nodded slowly and told me I had a very strong case. Derek's assault was documented. The financial abuse could be proven through bank records and credit card statements. The witnesses at the restaurant were credible. She laid out what I needed to do: file for a restraining order, freeze the joint accounts, gather all financial documentation, protect my business assets before Derek could do any more damage. I spent the next few days following her instructions. I contacted my bank and froze every account Derek had access to. I pulled years of credit card statements and discovered something that made my blood run cold. Derek had not just gambled away our savings. He had also opened multiple credit cards in my name, forging my signature on the applications. The total debt under my name was nearly $80,000. I also learned the truth about Derek's job. He had been fired from the BMW dealership 2 years earlier. For 2 years, he had pretended to go to work every day while actually going to gambling dens. He had lied to me every single morning, kissing me goodbye as if everything was normal. The betrayal went deeper than I had ever imagined. But instead of breaking me, it made me stronger. Every new discovery hardened my resolve. I was going to fight back. I was going to win. Grace filed for divorce and for the restraining order. She also reported the forged credit card applications to the police. Derek was not just facing divorce. He was facing criminal charges. The night before the first court hearing, I stood in front of the mirror in my small room at the shelter. The burns on my face were healing, leaving behind faint marks that would eventually become scars. I looked at those marks and made a promise to myself. These were not the scars of a victim. These were the scars of a survivor. The restraining order was granted within 48 hours. A judge reviewed the evidence and issued an order prohibiting Derek from coming within 500 feet of me or contacting me through any means. Derek violated it 3 days later. I was at my studio trying to focus on work when I saw him through the window. He was standing across the street watching me. My heart stopped for a moment, and then I reached for my phone. He walked toward the building calling my name. He said he was sorry. He said he would change. He said we could work things out if I would just listen. I did not listen. I called the police. They arrested him for violating the restraining order. This time he was not released. He was held in the county jail while prosecutors decided what additional charges to file. From his cell, Derek tried a different approach. He reached out to mutual friends, trying to turn them against me. He told them I was lying, that I was mentally unstable, that I had fabricated the entire incident. Some people believed him. Others did not. But the video Patricia had recorded was undeniable. It spread among our social circle, and one by one, people who had known us both began to see the truth. The financial investigation uncovered even more devastating information. Grace hired a forensic accountant who dug through years of records. We discovered that Derek had not just forged credit card applications. He had also been systematically transferring money from our joint accounts to pay off gambling debts. The total amount he had taken over 6 years was more than $120,000. There was also the matter of his supposed investments. Derek had told me our money was tied up in business opportunities. In reality, he had gambled every penny away. There were no investments. There never had been. Perhaps the most painful discovery was learning the truth about his job. Derek had been fired from the dealership for stealing from clients. He had been taking deposits for cars that never arrived, pocketing the money for himself. The dealership had chosen not to press charges in exchange for his quiet resignation. For 2 years, he had left our apartment every morning, pretending to go to work while actually feeding his addiction. I had slept beside this man for 6 years. I had trusted him with my life, my finances, my future. And he had been lying to me every single day. The divorce proceedings were straightforward given the evidence. Grace presented everything to the judge. The video of the assault, the forged credit cards, the financial records showing systematic theft, the medical documentation of my injuries. Derek attended the hearing with his own attorney, a man who looked uncomfortable throughout the proceedings. Derek tried to appear remorseful. He dabbed at his eyes with a tissue and spoke about wanting to save our marriage. But the judge had seen everything. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. When Derek finished speaking, she looked at him for a long moment before delivering her decision. The divorce was granted. I was not held responsible for any of the debts Derek had fraudulently created in my name. Derek was ordered to repay every dollar he had taken from our joint accounts, and the permanent restraining order meant he could never contact me again. There was still the criminal trial to come. The charges against Derek were serious: assault, financial fraud, identity theft, violation of a protective order. I was called to testify. It was one of the hardest things I have ever done. I sat in that witness chair and told my story to a room full of strangers. I described the years of control, the financial manipulation, the isolation from friends and family. I described the morning at Maple Grove, the hot coffee hitting my face, the cold look in my husband's eyes. When the prosecutor asked me to identify the man who had done these things, I looked directly at Derek. He was sitting at the defense table looking smaller than I had ever seen him. I pointed at him and stated his name clearly. He no longer had any power over me. Not anymore. The jury found him guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 3 years in prison. He would also be required to make financial restitution and would be permanently prohibited from contacting me after his release. As the bailiff led Derek away, he turned to look at me one last time. There was no anger in his eyes anymore, just emptiness. I walked out of that courthouse into the December sunshine. My mother was waiting on the steps, and so was Miranda, who had driven 3 hours to be there. Patricia stood a little apart, watching with a small smile on her face. Helen hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. Miranda held my hand, and Patricia, this stranger who had become my guardian angel, simply nodded. "You did it," she said. "I always knew you would." But winning the trial was just the first step. The real work, the work of healing, was only beginning. The first few months after the trial were harder than I expected. The immediate danger was gone. Derek was in prison. The legal battles were over. But the damage he had done did not disappear just because he was no longer in my life. Some mornings I would wake up and forget just for a second that everything had changed. I would reach across the bed expecting to find someone there, and the empty space would bring everything rushing back. I flinched at unexpected sounds: a door slamming, someone raising their voice in a store. These small things would send my heart racing, would make me look around for an escape route, even when there was nothing to escape from. The burns on my face healed, but they left marks, faint scars that I could see every time I looked in the mirror. Some days I hated them. Other days I saw them as proof that I had survived something terrible. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in trauma. Her name was Dr. Reyes, and she had warm eyes and a patient way of listening that made me feel safe. In her office, I talked about things I had never said out loud, about the years of walking on eggshells, about the way Derek had made me doubt my own perceptions, about the shame I felt for not leaving sooner. Dr. Reyes helped me understand that what I experienced was not my fault. Abusers are skilled at manipulation. They do not start with violence. They start with love, with charm, with promises. By the time the control begins, you are already trapped in a web of emotional dependency that makes leaving feel impossible. I also joined a support group for survivors of domestic violence. We met every Wednesday evening in a church basement. There were women of all ages, from all backgrounds, each with her own story of survival. Listening to them helped me feel less alone. Sharing my own story helped me process what had happened. Slowly, I started to rebuild my life. My studio had suffered during the years of my marriage. I had been so focused on surviving at home that I had not been able to give my best to my work. But after the divorce, something changed. I threw myself into design with a passion I had not felt in years. Clients noticed the difference. Referrals started coming in. Within 6 months of the trial, I signed a contract to design a boutique hotel downtown. It was the largest project of my career, the kind of opportunity I had dreamed about when I first opened my studio. My relationships improved too. I reconnected with friends I had pushed away during my marriage. Miranda and I became close again, spending weekends together, talking on the phone for hours. She never said "I told you so," never made me feel guilty for the years of silence. She just welcomed me back into her life as if no time had passed. My mother moved in with me for the first 3 months after the trial. She cooked for me, made sure I ate, held me when the nightmares came. Having her there helped me remember who I had been before Derek, the strong, independent woman who had started her own business at 28, the daughter who had worked her way through college after losing her father. That woman was still inside me. She had just been buried under years of control and fear. I adopted a dog from a rescue shelter. He was a scruffy brown mutt with one ear that stood up and one that flopped down. I named him Maple after the restaurant where my old life ended and my new one began. He slept at the foot of my bed every night and greeted me with wild enthusiasm every time I came home. His unconditional love was healing in ways I could not explain. I also started volunteering at the same shelter where I had stayed after leaving Derek. Once a week, I would go there and talk to women who were going through what I had gone through. I shared my story not to make myself feel better, but to show them that survival was possible, that there was life after abuse. Patricia became a regular part of my life. We had lunch together once a month. She told me about her career as a prosecutor, about the cases that had shaped her, about why she had dedicated her retirement to helping survivors. In her, I found not just a mentor, but a friend. One year after the incident at Maple Grove, I was sitting in a coffee shop on a quiet Tuesday morning. The sun was streaming through the windows. Maple was curled up under my chair, snoring softly. I caught a glimpse of my reflection in my phone screen and paused. The scars on my face had faded to thin white lines barely visible unless you knew where to look. But I knew. I would always know. I thought about the lessons I had learned, about what I wanted to say to anyone who might be going through something similar. Real love does not make you afraid. If you are walking on eggshells in your own home, if you are constantly worried about your partner's reaction, if you feel smaller every day instead of stronger, that is not love. That is control. No one has the right to control you. Not your money, not your time, not your relationships. Those things belong to you no matter who you are married to. Leaving is not failure. Staying in a toxic relationship because you are afraid of what people will think, because you are embarrassed to admit you made a mistake, because you hope things will change, that is not strength. Walking away, even when it is terrifying, is the bravest thing you can do. You are not alone. There are people ready to help. Strangers like Patricia who will step in when you need them most. Friends who are waiting for you to reach out. Resources that exist specifically for situations like yours. But you have to be willing to accept help. You have to be willing to let people in. I thought about Derek sometimes, but not often. I did not hate him anymore. Hate requires energy, and I had none left to waste on him. I had not forgiven him either. Some things do not deserve forgiveness, but I had released him from my heart. He was no longer my husband, no longer my problem, no longer anything but a chapter in my story that had ended. That morning in the coffee shop, I finished my drink and stood up. Maple stretched and wagged his tail ready for our walk. I stepped outside into the Denver sunshine, feeling the cool mountain air on my face. I used to think that morning at Maple Grove was the worst day of my life. The hot coffee, the cold eyes, the public humiliation. But now, I understood it differently. That was the day I was set free. The day I stopped being a victim and started being a survivor. If you are watching this and you recognize something of yourself in my story, I want you to know that you deserve better. You deserve to be loved without fear. You deserve to feel safe in your own home. You deserve to control your own life. And you are so much stronger than you think. This is my life now. Finally, I am the one writing my own story. I would love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever trusted someone who turned out to be completely different from who you thought they were? How did you find the strength to walk away? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story touched you, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to this channel so you do not miss any of our stories. And remember, no matter what you are going through, you are never truly alone. Thank you for watching, and thank you for being part of this community. I wish you safety, strength, and the courage to write your own story, whatever that may look like. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.